Mythological Unification Theory 101. Lesson 2. Again, the core of the mythological unification theory is that humanity has a shared hidden story, one that connects myth, history, consciousness, religion, and identity, and remembering it matters. Here is another passage that supports the mythological unification theory from Diodorus Siculus' Library of History. Now the spirit they called, as we translate their expression, Zeus, and since he was the source of the spirit of life in animals, they considered him to be in a sense the father of all things. And they say that the most renowned of the Greek poets also agrees with this when he speaks of this god as the father of men and gods. Now, I have just shown you several passages that begin to pull together the mythological unification theory. However, in addition to reading and comparing mythologies, I also began to look at art that depicted the Abrahamic God, and I compared it to art from ancient mythology, and I saw many similarities. Compare the object that God is in, which is a pomegranate, in the painting from the Sistine Chapel. This is a symbol that represents the bloodline of Zeus, and you will see that it connects with Persephone very shortly. Interestingly, the tarot card also makes use of the pomegranate symbol. Here the emperor has it in his hand, while the high priestess has a Kabbalah tree behind her, and the fruit of that Kabbalah tree are pomegranates. Here is Persephone, who has the pomegranate in her hand. In mythology, we are introduced to Persephone as being the wife of Hades in the underworld. But the truth is, Hades, or Pluto, was sacrificed as a child, and the underworld Hades is really Zeus. And the passage will be shown shortly that proves this out. After years of comparative anthropology and mythology and comparative archaeology, I came to the conclusion that many of these ancient mythologies across the world were telling the same story, but with a slight difference in each culture. The key to seeing the mythological unification theory is the story of the murdered son of a father god. Every ancient story in mythology includes the tale of a son who was teaching the people good ways when he was murdered by jealous opposition. These murderers were labeled as the Titans, giants, Set and the 72 conspirators, and so on. Once this key is aligned in all mythologies, they fit together like a puzzle. As I said before, I realized this after I began to study a library out of the Harvard University Press known as the Loeb Library. I had pinpointed the books I knew would tell the story of what I had formulated because they were focused in on mythology. It was in the writings of the ancient Greek, Roman, and Egyptian scholars, Diodorus Siculus, known as Plutarch, Hesiod, Homer, Manetho, Valerius Maximus, Macrobius, Lucian, Virgil, Ovid, and others that the story began to unfold with the timeline. Furthermore, I found the writings of Sanchonathan in the British Library, who was an ancient Phoenician scholar. He helped to expand the story. The family, which I called the Chronide bloodline, those related to Zeus or Cronus, began in Tyre. Their story of evolving advancement is told in the writings of Sanchonathan. The tales of calculated murder, calculated breeding, and calculated alliances are clearly spelled out as this family began to move into a position of global power. Some of the details of this family are very cruel, but as they evolved, they made efforts to change their ways and traveled the world to teach their mysteries about agriculture, astronomy, science, medicine, and more. The story starts out with Diodorus Siculus referring to them as Atlanteans, with their first king being Uranus. And he described their social structure, which was originally based on a matriarchy. Now, the names of these people vary from culture to culture, but for ease of telling the story, I will use the Greek names mostly at this time. The god known as Uranus was the first to challenge the matriarchy. After the unfortunate death of his father, who died from a wild animal attack, he was a tyrant and he had many consorts. His main wife was a sister known as Gaia. She did not like his ways, so she parted from him, but he threatened her and her children often with violence. When Gaia's son Cronus grew up, he chased his father away from the area, but his father would not leave them alone. Cronus ended up killing his father, as his father, Uranus, had killed the great-grandmother queen, who is equivalent to Tiamat in Sumerian mythology, and her husband, and took power. Cronus then became the leader and decided that his people would leave their island home or their area home of Tyre and expand throughout the world. Cronus was a knowledgeable farmer and is credited with inventing many agricultural tools, including the pickaxe. However, Cronus had strange ways, which included sacrificing some of his children during times of trouble. This is why they say that Cronus ate his children, and his sister wife Rhea had to hide the children from him. Cronus and his brother Iapetus, who may also be referred to as Atlas, also killed a brother named Hyperion and his son Helios, when they feared that Hyperion was moving into a position of power after the death of Uranus. Helios' sister committed suicide after she saw her brother murdered. Eventually, Cronus would kill Iapetus as well. Zeus was one of the children of Cronus and Rhea. He was hid in a cave on Mount Ida in Crete to protect him. Another son named Poseidon was hidden on the island of Rhodes. When Zeus grew up into a man, he took over his father's kingdom. Zeus was completely unlike his father and preferred gentler ways of living, and the people loved him. Zeus had many consorts and children and helped to expand his father's kingdom. He had many enemies as well, even though his family was referred to as Atlanteans because they originally came from the people who lived near the Atlantic Ocean and on the island of Atlantis. They were not well liked because of the previous things Uranus and Cronus had done. In the ancient writings, we find out that it is Zeus that abducted Persephone and not the dead Hades or Pluto. When Zeus had a son by Persephone, he named that son Zagreus, and he intended for Zagreus to inherit his kingdom. But Zagreus was brutally murdered by Titans when he was just a child, and the Titans cannibalized Zagreus, leaving only his heart for Zeus to find. Coming home to find out what had happened, Zeus went insane. He prepared a potion from the heart of Zagreus and drank it, believing he had the soul of Zagreus inside him, and he would impregnate another woman and transfer that soul to the new child. That woman was Semele. Some say that Zeus may have also given that potion to Semele before she became pregnant. The child born was Dionysus. Dionysus was hidden and raised as a girl in Nysa to hide him from his enemies. Dionysus grew up and became the great god, also known as Osiris, as verified by multiple ancient scholars and what I had previously shown in this class. By the fierce resentment of implacable Hera, the Titans cunningly smeared their round faces with disguising chalk, and while he contemplated his changeling countenance reflected in a mirror, they destroyed him with an infernal knife. There, where his limbs had been cut piecemeal by the Titan steel, the end of his life was the beginning of a new life as Dionysus. He appeared in another shape and changed into many forms. Now, young, life-crafty Cronites, shaking the aegis cape. Now as an ancient Cronus having need, pouring rain. Sometimes he was a curiously formed baby, sometimes like a mad youth, with the flower of the first down marking his rounded chin with black. After the first Dionysus had been slaughtered, Father Zeus learnt the trick of the mirror with its reflected image. He attacked the mother of the Titans with avenging brand and shut up the murderers of horned Dionysus within the gate of Tartarus. The trees blazed, the hair of suffering earth was scorched with heat. He kindled the bolts, the Assyrian waves, set afire the neighboring Caspian Sea and the Indian mountains. The Red Sea rolled billows of flame and warned Arabian Nereus, the opposite west, also fiery Zeus, blasted with his thunderbolt in love for his child, and under the foot of Zephyrus, the western brine half burnt spat out a shining stream. The northern ridges, even the surface of the frozen northern sea, bubbled and burned. Under the climb of snowy Agosiris, the southern corner boiled with hotter sparks. This is from Nonus's Dionysica. This is basically telling you that the Titanomachy started because of the murder of Zagreus. Now let's read a bit from Hesiod's Theogonian days. For a long time they fought in bitter toil against one another in strong battles. The Titan gods and those born of Cronus, the proud Titans from lefty Orthus, and from Olympus the gods, givers of good, whom fair-haired Rhea bore, having lain with Cronus, with bitter war against one another. They fought continually for 10 full years. There was no end or relief from harsh strife. For either the war's outcome was evenly balanced, but when he gave them everything fitting, nectar and ambrosia, which the gods eat themselves, and the proud spirit grew in the breast of all, when they tasted nectar and lovely ambrosia. When the Father of gods and men said to them, Hear me, good children of earth and sky, that I may say what the spirit in my chest commands. For a long time now against one another, we have fought every day for victory and power. The Titan gods and we born of Cronus, show your great force and unbeatable arms against the Titans in savage war. Remember our friendship and how much you suffered before you came to the light from grievous bondage, under the murky gloom thanks to our counsels. 100 arms shot from the shoulders of each, and all 50 heads grew from the shoulders of each, from their massive bodies. They stood against the Titans in grim battle, holding great rocks in their massive hands. The Titans opposite brought force to their ranks. Expectantly, both displayed the deeds of arms and strength together, and the vast sea echoed loudly, and the earth resounded greatly, and the wide sky shook and groaned, and great Olympus was shaken. From its foundation by the immortals' charge, a heavy tremor of feet reached dim Tartarus, and the loud noise of unspeakable rout and strong weapons. So they hurled at each other the painful weapons. Shouts from both sides reached starry sky as they came together with great outcry. Zeus no longer restrained his might, but now his heart was filled with wrath, and he revealed all his force from the sky and Olympus both. He came throwing a lightning flurry. The bolts flew thick with thunder and lightning from his massive hand, whirling a holy flame. One after another, the life-giving earth resounded. In flames, the vast woods crackled loudly about together, for so great a noise would arise from one fallen upon and the other falling down. All the land and ocean streams and the barren sea were boiling. The hot blast enveloped the land-born Titans. The flames reached the upper brightness in its fury. Although they were strong, the blazing glow of thunder and lightning blinded their eyes. The awful heat seized chasm, it seemed, for eyes to see and ears to hear the sound, just as if earth and wide sky from above came. Such a noise arose from the strife of clashing gods. The wind stirred up earthquake and dust and thunder and lightning and blazing lightning bolt, the weapons of great Zeus, and brought the shout and cry into the midst of both sides. A great din arose from fearful strife, and strength's work was revealed. So we just revealed that the Titan Maki was about Zagreus. After the war was over and Zeus was victorious, he would reincarnate Zagreus, who would be called Dionysus, through a woman named Semele. Semele was kept for a more brilliant union, for already Zeus, ruling on high, intended to make a Dionysus grow up, a bull-shaped copy of the older Dionysus, since he thought with regret of the ill-fated Zagreus. This was the son born to Zeus in dragon bed by Persephone, the consort of the black-robed king of the underworld. When Zeus put out a deceiving shape of many coils, as a gentle dragon, twining around her in lovely curves, and ravished the maidenhood of unwedded Persephone, though she was hidden, when all that dwelt in Olympus were bewitched by this one girl, rivals in love for the marriageable maid, and offered the dower from an unsmirched bridal. This is from known as Dionysica. Now, I just revealed to you that Persephone was abducted by Zeus, and he impregnated her, and she gave birth to Zagreus. Zagreus was killed, and as I said before, he took the remaining heart, made a potion, and believed that he could reincarnate Zagreus into a new body, which he did through a woman named Semele. Again, now Persephone may have been the daughter of Zeus and Demeter, although other stories say that she was the daughter of Oceanus and Demeter. So it's unknown truly who her father was. The tale continues on with the conquest of the world by Zeus and his children. Dionysus, along with his wife Ariadne Isis, who is the same woman from the story of the Minotaur of Crete, as per the ancient writings of Diodorus Siculus, helped to create the royal pharaonic bloodline that flows through many people's veins today. The other children of Zeus spread across the world and became the kings and queens of every nation and founders of cities, probably including those in the Americas. One of the biggest problems during the time of Osiris, we find out, was cannibalism. Diodorus Siculus wrote, Osiris was the first they record to make mankind give up cannibalism, for after Isis did discover the fruit of both wheat and barley, which grew wild over the land along with other plants, but was still unknown to man, and Osiris had also devised the cultivation of these fruits, all men were glad to change their food, both because of the pleasing nature of the newly discovered grains, and because it seemed to their advantage to refrain from their butchery of one another. As proof of the discovery of these fruits, they offer the following ancient custom, which they still observe. Even yet at harvest time, the people make a dedication of the first heads of the grain to be cut, and standing beside the sheaf, beat themselves and call upon Isis, by this act rendering honor to the goddess for the fruits which she discovered at the season when she first did this. And it continues on. Now, other legends say that it was Demeter who helped to introduce grains as well. A timeline is given in the ancient writings for when these people lived. Per Diodorus Siculus, he wrote, the number of years from Osiris and Isis, they say, to the reign of Alexander, who founded the city which bears his name in Egypt, is over 10,000, but according to other writers, a little less than 23,000. So basically, it could be anywhere from roughly 12,000 to 25,000 years ago that these people lived, which is about the time the Ice Age ended. Now these people did travel the entire world. Again, Diodorus Siculus wrote, Zeus overcame him in battle, and on gaining supreme power, visited all of the inhabited world, conferring benefactions upon the race of men. And this is a constant theme, that you have a group of gods that have traveled in all of the pantheons around the world and taught their mystery schools and brought in civilization. Now, Plato wrote about Atlantis and that it was Poseidon, who was the brother of Zeus, who inherited the island in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean outside of the Pillars of Heracles. This island allowed people to travel the open sea and over to the other side, which probably were the Americas. Plato gives a pretty good description of the sons of Poseidon who ran the island and began to take over other parts of the world in his Timaeus and Critias. Diodorus Siculus also discusses one of the Titans named Atlas, giving the name Atlanteans to his people, but they lived in the northwestern part of Africa. He also named the mountains there the Atlas Mountains. Again, this tale of the Cronides stems from decades of my own research, and no other researcher has come close. As I've just shown, the Atlanteans can refer to the descendants of the Olympian Poseidon, and it could refer to the people of the Titan Atlas. All of the other gods and goddesses were related to the Atlanteans. Diodorus Siculus refers to their first king as Uranus. The rest of the story of this family involves Zeus, who is by far the biggest influence on our ancient world and into today. Again, the key is the murdered god. It started with the murder of Zagreus, and we know that Osiris was also eventually murdered. This theme is repeated in mainstream religion with the death of Jesus Christ. Zeus is also Odin. There are writings that connect the ancient Greeks with these Nordic gods. Snorri Sturluson wrote in the Prose Edda, "Next they made for themselves in the middle of the world a city which is called Asgard, men call it Troy." So the Asgard is the Nordic home of the gods, and it is also called Troy, which was in modern day Turkey, thus connecting Greek and Nordic mythologies. One of the biggest connections with Greek mythology, Egyptian mythology, and Hinduism in India comes from a book series known as the Dionysica by the scholar known as. This scholar specifically describes the campaigns of Dionysus into India. The descriptions make it clear that Dionysus would be the equivalent of Krishna, who is bringing in his mysteries. Now see the young Krishna with the flute. And here is the young Dionysus, Osiris, as Zagreus, who then reincarnates as Dionysus, Osiris. Here is a mosaic of Dionysus fighting the Indians in the Palazzo Massium at Rome. There was one of the Indian kings who refused to accept the mysteries of Dionysus, and he had to take this king out. O mighty Dionysus, your father bids you destroy the race of Indians, untaught of piety. Come lift the thyrsus of battle in our hands and earn heaven by your deeds. That is from Nonnus's Dionysica. Other passages from Nonnus's Dionysica that tell us quickly that Dionysus was in India conquering it include two of the following. In the morning the god went forth to war, driving before him the violence of the black men who dwelt in Phrygia and Ascania from the yoke of cruel tyranny. But swift-shoe Hera, likening herself to an Indian, the curly-headed Melanius, warned Astraeus, that spear-shaking captain of men, not to uplift the thyrsus, nor to heed the yell of drunken satyrs, but to raise war to the death against Dionysus. Now I've just connected the Egyptian, Greek, Roman, Hindu, and Nordic mythologies. All of these mythologies connect with many other mythologies, including the Celtic, Sumerian, Japanese, Chinese, Mesoamerican, Native American, South American, Polynesian, and many other mythologies. There are stories of Red Horn in the Mississippian area of America that included a white man who was incredibly tall with red hair that he put back in a ponytail, who assisted the Native Americans at the time fighting cannibalistic giants. There are other stories of bearded white men known as Quetzalcoatls and Viracochas and white buffalo women that were said to come to the Americas and bring their mysteries and their rituals to the people who needed them. Here is a depiction of Cocopelli playing the flute versus Krishna playing the flute, who is, in my opinion, also Dionysus. These are separated by different continents, and the imagery is very equivalent. Now I will go into some of the equivalents per my research. Chaos and Abyss were the goddess and god of ancient Greece, who, in my opinion, are equivalent to the Sumerian Tiamat and Abzu. There are other gods and goddesses I believe they are equivalent to. Please take your time now to go through the remaining slides and artwork and look at the art and the comparisons of other gods and goddesses. In this introductory class, I will end on this last god, who's also incredibly important to the mythological unification theory. There are many other gods that go beyond the basic Olympians that could be looked at in history, but to begin with, in this class, we'll stop at this last god and move on